Okay, so we are going to finish up chapter 45's function part. Our objectives are to go over the function of the ureter, the bladder, the urethra, and the anatomy of it. We already hit on the kidneys, which was the hardest part, so we've got through that. So now we are on the ureter. We last ended at the formation of urine in the renal pelvis. And I'm going to quickly draw that out for you. Okay, so we have our kidney, and this kidney happens to be lopsided, but life isn't perfect. So if you remember, we have our pyramids, our columns, our minor canals, our major canals, and of course I'm using all the ways I remember this. But so you have your renal pyramidals, you have your papillae, or the point of your pyramid, because remember these kind of look like pyramids. We have minor calcus and major calcuses, which basically take all that urine formation and it goes from a small opening to a bigger opening, eventually leading to the renal pelvis. Like I said before, these to me, I was looking at this and I saw legs here. Alright, so the renal pelvis is going to be in between your legs, or your pelvis will be in between your legs, hopefully. We hope it is. So, the nephrons, which there's millions of these in here, they're taking urine that's going through this pyramid, going up the top of the pyramid, and it's eventually going to form in your renal pelvis, okay? So it'll eventually form here. Now, this can only hold just 3 to 5 milliliters, so it can't stay in here. And if it does stay in here for whatever reason, it blocks a kidney stone, or I'm sorry, renal canicula. If it stays in here, we're going to have significant issues. Tissue damage, dissension, which is like one of the most significant things you can have. The renal, it attaches to your ureter from your renal pelvis, and it's really nice because it's the uropelvic junction. All right, so basically your urethra and with your pelvic, all right, junction. Too easy, and that is located here. Now this is the smallest part. The smallest part means that it is most probable to clog. So if we have an issue, it's going to probably be here. So if something blocks it, this is the smallest part, that's where you're going to have that issue. Alright, so the urine continues to go down, and this is where it starts entering that ureter. Now the ureter is made up of longitudinal and circular muscles. So we have muscles going down and around, and that permits peristalsis. And if you can remember, peristalsis is basically one part will get smaller and then it will release, and the next part will get smaller, and it's pushing that fluid the entire way down. Kind of looks like a worm. But it's going to start traveling down that ureter. The ureter, of course, is able to stretch some, which is great because it's going to have to. And let's get in. I'm going to erase that now. So now we have the urine. It's going down the ureter. The ureter is 10 to 12 inches approximately. Of course, it all gives or takes, but it's going to connect, and its entire function, entire purpose of life is to connect those kidneys to your bladder, because the urine cannot stay up here. All right, so it's going to connect those kidneys to the bladder, and that it's going to do it through that ureter. The ureter is going to attach at your bladder. Now, it's kind of confusing because when you look at it, you think it attaches from the top, but that's not the case at all. If you look at the back of your bladder, you have some glands here, you have your prostate here. Actually, probably just a bit farther. So you have some glands, and again, this is the back side of your bladder. Perfectly drawn, of course, because I'm awesome like that. So you have your prostate glands. You have some other glands right here. But basically, it's going to enter your ureters, will enter your bladder at the lateral, which means side, lateral base. So it's more like the entire ureter does this loop-de-loop. It seems kind of unnecessary because it could just enter right here, but instead it enters down here. Alright, so it enters down towards the base on the lateral side. So you've got two ureters coming down. Alright, where those ureters meet in the back of your bladder is going to be, or the base, I guess I could say, the base of your bladder is going to be what's called, and again, another great word. Thank goodness we're not trying to explain the enzyme cascade again. it's going to be your and it was similar to your oh, that's junction. And you will hear this as UVJ. Alright, so your ureterovascular. Alright, so they're referring to the bladder here as a vessel, which it is. It holds stuff. That's its entire purpose. So it's a ureterovascular junction, or UVJ. Alright, so the UVJ is where the ureter is attached to the bladder. Alright, so we have up here, we have where the ureter attaches to the pelvis, uretero-pelvic junction, or UPJ, and then we have the UVJ. So it attaches to that bladder. I don't know. It attaches to that bladder, and from there, the bladder, of course, starts to fill. It's important to say that as this ureter comes down, there's all these nerves and blood vessels that come through, and it's really held together by a lot of ligaments. So it's kind of important to know. We also have, and I'm going to draw little holes here. Let's see if we can make this bigger. Where your ureter enters your bladder, and again, remember we said the lateral backside does a loop-de-loop. So let's get this bladder a little bit bigger. Where it enters the bladder. Alright, this is assuming that we kind of cut it open. Your ureter's going back here. Here's one ureter. And here's the other, of course. So your urine's going to come through here. And where it comes through, you're going to have all these ligaments that attach it and hold it in place. And that's important. You're also going to have an additional ligament which attaches more towards the top of your bladder, and it's attached to your belly button, or I should say your umbilical ligament. And it's called your, let's see if I can get the right name for you. Alright, basically what happens is as the bladder fills, this ligament is going to be pulling up tension on it, and it makes it so that the bladder rises, rather than go out to, down or wherever. It's going to make it so that the bladder rises up as it becomes distended with fluid. Now, as this fluid, that's another thing I wanted to hit. As this fluid comes through, it has to make sure that it doesn't go back up the tubes, because if it goes back up the tubes, you're going to have an issue. You're going to have a reflux, and that's not good. So whenever this bladder becomes distended, you're going to have it start closing off so it can make sure, and it kind of works like the heart, so it can make sure that it doesn't flow back up your ureter. Because if it does, we're going to have bacteria issues. We'll have a significant issue. So it's going to close at the ureter first, the ureter lumen, which pretty much means just a hole. And then the top of the bladder is going to press down on your ureter, your UVJs. Okay, that's what we're going to call it. UVJs, or essentially where your ureter attaches to your vesicle, this being your bladder. Alright, so this is where it attaches. So it's going to close those off. So just kind of keep that in mind. Now, the bladder itself has special tissue, because you've got to keep in mind the muscles have to be able to expand very far and also be able to contract. So when we have these muscles are referred to, and they have a special name, your not a great speller. Alright, basically this is the muscles for your bladder. Alright, and they're kind of intertwined, interlaced, and they have the ability to stretch very far and then also contract. And that's important because you're going to need them to contract. Obviously, these are smooth muscles. You also need the bladder to be able to extend. So for that reason, it's made out of transitional epithelium. You have mucosal lining that lines all of your urinary tract. And the reason that's important is because you can have a lot of issues that can spread because it's the same type of tissue that lines it all. So if I get cancer in here, it can very easily go up here, or vice versa to come down here because we have the same connective tissue, that mucosal lining, which urine's very acidic, so that's why it's lined like that. All right, again, your muscles in your bladder can extend very far and then contract. You can get about 1,500 milliliters per day of urine, and in general, they say that you are going to go to the bathroom 5 to 6 times per day. Now, of course, you don't produce as much urine at night, and that's because of hormones, specifically your antidiuretic hormone, which prevents too much urine formation at night. And of course, you have your sphincters. So you have an internal and external sphincter. Your external sphincter is made out of, is voluntary, so it's made out of skeletal muscle. And this, your internal sphincter, is made out of smooth muscle. So you don't have control of your internal sphincter, but you do have control of your external sphincter, and we'll go over impulses here in a second. When you start to fill up urine in the bladder, it can hold tons of fluid. Again, it all depends on about the muscles and how big it is and how much fluid it is, different things. But basically, you can feel the urge that you need to go to the bathroom at about 200 to 250 milliliters of urine. And then you're doing the pee-pee dance by 400 to 600 milliliters. Maximum, it can hold almost 1,000 milliliters in here. So it can hold that much in urine. Just so you know, your urine, or the formation of urine, excretion of urine, is not only called uration, but micturition. I'm not pronouncing that correctly, so let me spell that out. I think I have just as hard of a time as pronouncing as I do spelling, which is probably fine. Micturition, alright, is another word for the excretion of urine. The transitional epithelium, it does not absorb urine. Of course, none of it can, because if it did, then urine would just start leaking into your other structures in your body, and that would not be great. Alright, so the other thing we have, the transitional epithelium, that's the other thing I wanted to hit on. Transitional epithelium is basically the ability to think of transvestite, or be able to change, alright? So when the bladder is not full, you have these stacks of cells, alright? You can't see that very well. You have these stacks of cells, but as the bladder becomes distended, alright, it goes from stacks of cells to maybe just being 1 to 2. Interesting, that's not coming off. 1 to 2 cells thick, so it's going to change as we go. Alright, let's make sure we're not hitting anything there. Alright, the last part of this was the urethra, and again, your primary function, your ureter, it's to link your kidneys to your bladder, and your primary function of your bladder is to store. And of course, guess what your urethra does? Your urethra connects your bladder to the outside world. So basically, let me erase some stuff. Basically, it's going to connect with the bladder neck, and like I said before, it has an internal and an external sphincter. You have incontinence because they have lost control of that external sphincter, where you have a neurological problem where the signal is not transferred. And continence is the ability to control that external sphincter. So basically, when you have a brain signal, and I might as well go ahead and wipe this off. When you have to pee, and remember we said we have 200 to 250 milliliters is about when you have to go. By 4 to 6, you're doing the pee dance, and you can maybe get up to 1,000 milliliters in your bladder. But what's going to happen is as that bladder descends, it's going to start sending impulses. All right, so here's a smaller version of your kidneys. All right, linking you to your bladder, linking you to your urethra. Okay. Not only is there all these ligaments that hold this stuff in place, but the other thing is that you're going to have signals. You're going to have signals coming off of your bladder, and Maybe you can see this card. All right. You're gonna have signals coming off of your bladder that are saying, "Hey, I'm distended. I would like to pee." So these signals are going to come off of your bladder. They're going to go to the brain. All right. Here, the brain's going to process whether or not we want to pee. Now, of course, if you're incontinent, you have some type of neural issue, you're a small child, you're not going to have that ability. But basically, the message gets sent up to the brain, and it's going to go through your sacral portion of your spine. It's going to get sent up to the brain, and the brain is going to process the information. It's either going to say yes or no, and depending on that, we'll send a parasympathetic or a sympathetic reaction in response to it. So once that message comes down, if it has the ability to control it, it can send it one of two ways. One, it's going to say, okay, now you can go to the bathroom. And it's going to relax your internal and external sphincter. Now remember, I said you don't have control of that internal one. So pretty much what you have is pressure right on that external one. If it's not appropriate for you to go, it's going to send that message down, and it's going to start clamping down on that external sphincter. All right. I shouldn't have to say this, but your bladder is anterior to your vagina, and it's below your pubic symphysis. So it's that hard part of your bone. So it's underneath that. For males, it's anterior to your prostate, which is why prostate has such a large effect on the ability to urinate. It's because when the prostate inflames from the backside, it puts a lot of pressure on it. All right, so that is going to sum up all of your functions. And from here, we have to go into age-related results.